Hey guys, it's John from Gatti's Garage. Today we're going to be shortening some forks internally and fitting a CBR wheel on our GSXR forks. Stick around to see how. Good morning guys. Saturday morning here in the shop. Real early. I've been here for a couple hours. I had to get in here and install the collet chuck on the lathe because I'm going to need it for today's work, and I decided yesterday to get started on it and didn't get finished. So anyway, got that done, and now we're ready to get to work. So plan today is up in the air a little bit. I think I'm going to work on my dad's bike, and we're going to look at shortening the forks. Seems to be something a lot of people are confused by. I don't see a lot of information online about it, so I figured we'd do a little bit of a deep dive on internally shortening forks, or drag cutting forks it may be called. Funny enough, you really don't actually cut anything. You actually flip a spacer, and it just restricts movement. Anyway, there's several different ways to do this. I did used to do it by actually cutting the dampening rod and rethreading it and stuff, but I've since switched over to this. It's a little bit easier way to do it, and I'm going to show you guys how we do that. So anyway, that's on the agenda for today, and I don't know what else. See how long that takes us, how many interruptions we have, all that good stuff as usual. So we are going to jump out in the shop. I'll show you guys how we determine how much we want to shorten them, and then we'll take it from there. So we want to determine how much to shorten our forks. First thing we're going to do, we've got our frame set at our ride height we want, clamped down on blocks, and now we have our front tire we're going to run. So I basically just stand it up on the table, check your overall height of the tire, which we have just at 22 inches. So we want our axle half that, 11 inches. Then we'll measure off the table up to our center of axle right now, which is about 8 3/4. So to get that to 11, obviously we need to shorten 2 1/4 inches from here to here. So next thing we'll do is go ahead and tear down this front end, get it off the bike, and go over to the workbench where we're going to do all our work. Alright, so first up, we got to get this fork disassembled. So I drain the oil into the pan, the bulk of it. Then I go ahead and hang the fork tube itself in a trash can, just real carefully. Let that, continue to drain. And then we can pull the damper rod here out of the outside leg, which is really what we need. So as far as doing the work. And then again, I'll stick this, I don't know why I only grabbed one battery, but okay. So this part here is really what we're after to do our work. Alright, so we got our fork tube here. What we need to do to gain access to the bottom of the damper rod here is unthread this aluminum tube from here, which will allow us to gain access to the area we want to put the spacer on. So the best way I've found to do this, I have this chain vice grip. So you get that set up. And then I go over to the vise, grab this piece in the vise, and break this loose. Alright, so we got this tube separated. Now we have access to our damper rod here. So what we need to do now is disassemble the top part of this. So I pull this down. Looks like a 13mm nut in there. So we'll grab a couple more tools, come back and get this finished broke down. I was wrong, it was 14, so no big deal. I got a 14mm wrench. Go ahead and break the top cap loose from here. Be very careful you don't bend your damper adjustment rod while you have it out. Take this off. This is our spacer, factory spacer. And this is our complete damper rod. We're going to go ahead and pop this nut off the bottom now, which I believe is 10mm. Yep. Grab a baby vice grips. Put some pliers or some paper towels over. Just shouldn't need much, just a little bit to. There we go. Unthread our nut. Got a little piece of frass on the end of here. I'll go ahead and snip that off just to get it out of our way so it doesn't cause us any problems. And then obviously you want to pay careful attention to how you're dismantling all this stuff. So I'll just lay it out on the towel here. So you got nut, washer, looks like a stack of 3 steel washers, 2 shims, got our piston, which doesn't want to come off because we got just a slight burr on here. Just knock this on the sander to clean it up real quick. Knock that burr off. We got our piston, another couple shims, and then we come to this end piece, which we're going to need to get a wrench on, which I think is actually freaking 11mm, which of course I didn't bring. So one more trip to the toolbox. Alright, so now we're going to put our 2 1/4 inch spacer on here. What that's basically going to do, once we put this all back together, is restrict the length that this damper rod can extend. Right now, you know, it was extending about like this. We'll put the 2 1/4 inch spacer on, reassemble everything, and it'll just restrict the length of this rod, which in turn shortens the overall length of the fork. And we will just take that amount off of this spacer, actually a little bit less. I'll explain that when we get there. So right now we need to grab our calipers, figure out our dimensions for our little spacer we need to make, and we'll head over to the lathe and machine those up. Alright, we're over at the lathe. We got our piece of aluminum. We're going to machine up our spacers. We'll go ahead and make both of them, even though we got one fork apart at the minute. This is our new 5C collet chuck. If you're interested in machine work stuff as much as you are bikes. It's a cheapy, relatively cheapy collet chuck. It came with a unfinished back plate, so we had to machine and fit the back plate on our lathe, which I thought was very handy. because it just ensures that it's true to our lathe. So anyway, we got our 3/4 inch 5C collet. I'm going to go ahead and pop this in and machine our first spacer. So relatively simple piece here to make. Got a 3/4 inch 6061 aluminum. Just have to machine the outside diameter down to 650. Once we get that done, we'll drill the center out to 31/32, just shy of 1/2 inch. And we'll part it off to our needed length, 2.25 inches.
President can't talk. I'm not talking.
All right.
That's not a president.
All right. So we got our spacers cut. I'm going to go ahead and reassemble our damper rod. You just restack everything just how it came off. All your shims and washers. Put your spring back on here. Trying to do the right thing about what?
I gave her stuff back that I
I
borrowed.
gave you my scissors back. Nobody else does that. Can you just listen from the door for a minute? Please?
Always.
Thanks.
Been outside for a half an hour. Haven't done anything in the last.
The sheets I cleaned sweep
No,
the
since-
I put the sheets in
Don't
for
make them
Tuesday.
eat face.
Actually, so yes, I have.
Don't make them eat face.
Because he's mean to me.
Stay with the smiling face.
All right, so next up we got to shorten the stock spacer. So we made a 2 1/4 inch spacer, so I'm going to shorten these about 1 inch 800. I leave them a little bit longer than the spacer we made, reason being that'll give us a little bit of extra stiffness and preload on the spring without being too much where it causes binding in the spring. Being that the forks are much shorter, we're going to want them to be stiffer so that we don't have any ground clearance issues.
I want to see how it looks. You're just rebuilding them?
I'm shortening them.
Who's that for?
Himself.
Oh.
It's on a Saturday, it's for himself. That's John's day.
It's for our YouTube viewers. Tom, give me a hand here a second.
Absolutely.
That too.
I'm going to squeeze this down. There's a nut right there. I just need you to get that on it and just do, it's just a jam nut.
Okay.
Nope. Nope. Lower.
Oh.
Is it 14
Yeah,
millimeter?
wrong size.
Right there. Sorry.
That's right. What am I doing?
Just tighten it. There you go. That's it. Just,
That's enough?
yep. Just had to be snugged.
They're stiff bastards, huh?
Yeah. Well, we're stiffening them up a lot
Oh, that's
by
for the
doing what I'm
drag
doing.
bike?
Yeah.
Drove the rat rod yesterday.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. It needs to go down the highway for a couple hours.
Yeah.
You know? It does it popping a little bit at first, and then it clears out.
Did you hear me that?
You know this?
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh snap! I saw that. I saw that, but I was just
All right, so
a little bit of
you can see here, possibly, let me back up so you can get a good shot of this maybe somehow. Anyway, you can see we've got them shortened up. I'm gonna check and see. Should be 2 1/4 inches shorter. And with the spring pressure, we ended up with 2 inches shorter. I guess it's pushing them extended a little harder than when we just measure them, but that should give us what we need. We've got the thing set really low as far as ground clearance at 3 inches. So if we're up a little higher than that for the finished product, it really won't be the end of the day. All right, so we got one done. Obviously, we have the second fork to do. We're gonna go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back and get them fit on the front end of the bike and start looking at the next steps, which is gonna be figuring out how to fit our wheels, which have arrived and don't bolt right onto this setup. So I'll go ahead and show you those wheels, and we'll start looking at figuring out how to get them fit to the bike. One other thing real quick, if you don't have a second set of hands, somebody to help you, when you're putting these back together, grab a set of needle nose vice grips, lightly clamp it on there, and use that as a point where you can screw your spring down. That'll get the spring compressed for you. You can drop your spacer down, and you can thread your cap back onto your damper rod. Just a easier way to do it if you work alone. You got your jam nut here, so you get your damper rod down. Grab your 14 millimeter. Tighten your lock nut. Then you just unscrew your spring, opposite direction. Snap off your vice grips, and you're good to go. All right, so we got our forks all shortened. Back on the bike. Gonna measure our axle height. It looks like we're at 10 3/4, so we're a 1/4 inch longer than what we were shooting for, but we should get a little bit of sag in the suspension with the weight of the motor and everything, so I'm really happy with that. I'm going to grab our front wheel so we can start looking at that, figuring out our axle and all that stuff. Alright, so this is our front wheel. Actually, we have a pair of these wheels. They're 2012 CBR 1000RR wheels. They're nice and lightweight. I just love the look of them. And they're going to look great on this bike. That's it. Simple enough. So, we have our GSXR front axle that came with our front end. And it is 25 millimeters. This wheel is also 25 millimeters, so that's really awesome. Check fit here. And that slides right in. So that is really cool for fitting our stuff. This axle is steel. It's kind of heavy. I might make an aluminum axle. We're going to go ahead and get the wheel made up, spacers and stuff, and then we'll figure that out. Alright, so we got our wheel in. Matching axle. Really was nice. Alright, so one fresh wheel spacer. We're within 1.5 thousandths on center, so I'm going to say that's good enough for this type of work. So you can see we're getting our brake rotors fit on the front wheel. So the last thing we have to check and figure out is, do these rotors line up with the calipers? I kind of doubt they're going to. It would just be too good a luck if they lined up with the GSXR calipers, but maybe we'll get lucky. If not, we're going to have to figure out how to make adjustments so that they will line up, obviously. And so that's what we're doing right now. Got these rotor bolts. These are titanium. I can't express how light these are. I mean, it's unbelievable how light they are in your hand compared to a steel bolt. So, really cool stuff there. You know, just some of the special stuff we're doing on this bike to try and make it as lightweight as possible. Alright, so we got our rotors installed. We got our calipers here. These are the GSXR calipers. I don't have the brake caliper bolts yet. I ordered some titanium ones and they're shipping from England, so I haven't gotten them. And but I do have these little shoulders. And it actually looks like they line up. The rotors are just a little bit too big. They're oversized from the GSXR, I guess, but that is an easy fix. We just make some, because it being a radial brake, we make a standoff spacer and we are good to go. So, man, I can't, this front end swap, you know, the wheel swap onto this front end is almost like it was made to happen. So that is really awesome. I'm super excited about that. Once I get the bolts here, I don't even have the stock bolts, or I'd use those, but I bought this stuff in pieces. So, but once we get the stock or the caliper bolts, I'll go ahead and mount the bolts through there. We can lift off, get our dimension we need, and we'll just machine 4 spacers. But man, this CBR to GSXR wheel swap is like made to happen. Just wanted to mention too, I'm sure some of you guys are wondering why the brake calipers are mounted the way they are. So the forks have been inverted and flopped side to side so that we mount the calipers out front. Reason being, on a drag bike, you want to get all the weight bias you can towards the front. On a no-bar bike especially, since we have no wheelie bars, more limited by wheelbase in these different classes, the more weight you can kind of lean forward just helps the chassis work better. So because I am keeping the big brakes and dual brakes on the front, it to me is worth the time and effort to flip everything. It's really not a big deal while you have the front end off. You got everything flipped around and let you have a little bit more weight forward of the front axle. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today. Real happy with the progress. We got our wheel fit relatively easily. I do think I'm going to remake the front axle out of aluminum to lighten it up. It's pretty significantly heavy, made out of steel. Be a cool project, so that'll be on the agenda. We'll have to machine up those spacers for the calipers in the coming weeks once we get our caliper bolts. I did weigh up the lower pinch bolts for the front end. We replaced with titanium. They did arrive already. 4 bolts. We saved like 1.1 ounces, which I know doesn't seem like a lot, but it's all the little bits that add up. So once I pop this wheel back out, we'll weigh the wheel and compare its weight to the stock GS wheel. Just for fun, you know, all this stuff, we're going to weigh the front end compared to the stock GS front end, and we'll just have all these comparisons and try and see how everything works out. And again, you know, we're working towards this goal of having a under 400-pound motorcycle. So anyway, that's where we're at. Again, very happy with this progress for today. I hope you guys are enjoying this bike. This is a very special bike to me, as you probably know if you have seen the other episodes. If not, please check those out. Let us know what you think of it. Are you a drag bike fan? Do you like pro street bikes? They're my favorite kind of bike, and I'm kind of on a mission this year to make them more popular. I want to go to bike shows and see some cool pro street bikes. So anyway, that's it. We're out of here. I hope everybody has a happy new year. Be safe. I'm an old man these days, I guess, and I stay home and will probably be asleep at 9. So anyway, we're out of here, and we hope to see you next time at Gatti's Garage.